Hey there. I'm reading some classic old EC comics, and it's gonna come in handy a bit because when last I left off, we were about to talk about Hammer versus Amicus, and it's not just because they're both two British companies that dealt with horror in the 60s to 70s era, but that doesn't hurt. Now let's go back into my movie library because I'm finished reading the EC comics for a while, but I'm not finished talking about them. Hey there, and welcome back to the movie library. Thanks for joining me here again tonight. We are talking tonight about Hammer versus Amicus, the video that I promised you in my last video, and that I'm getting to, well, just like I promised, right now. In 1956, Max Rosenberg and Milton Subotsky had the idea to do a Frankenstein film. It had been a while since one of those kind of like gothic horrors had been done. Universal had been famous for them back in the day, but that era was gone. Now, Milton Subotsky and Max Rosenberg, most people will know, if they know the names, they'll know them for what they did with Amicus, for being Amicus. But when I say this, most people are going to say, I don't remember an Amicus like Frankenstein film. And you don't, because Hammer, I think it was Carreras, bought the rights to the film, well, the rights to the idea, I think, at least. I'm not sure if they had a finished script or not. I'd have to look that up. But that like idea, that from Subotsky and Rosenberg, it kind of became Curse of Frankenstein, which started Hammer down their successful run of gothic horror films. I've often wondered, and I'm sure that if I get the Severance set this year, that I'll find out exactly how they felt about like causing this fantastic film like big legacy that they actually couldn't really cash in on. And Amicus would never ever be known really for their gothic horror stuff, not in the way that we think of it today. Actually, let's go over and talk about it. Amicus became famous for the anthology horror. It's something that they did extremely well. Obviously, they were not the first people to do that. Actually, their first anthology film pretty much came from a TV script that a TV kind of pilot that they'd written before, much earlier on. And the success of the Hammer Gothics actually helped to launch them into doing this. Before this, Milton Subotsky and Max Rosenberg had done like pretty much, they did some teen films. They did like some teen rock and roll films, stuff like that. But that would all change in 1964 with the release of a specific film. Now, anthology films had been done before. Ealing had done it with Dead of Night long ago. Roger Corman had done his films as well, the Tales of Terror and a lot of the other ones like that. Hold on, I gotta put this back. And of course, EC Comics have been known for the kind of their anthology horror comics back in the day. Those would come more into prevalence later on, and they would become very important to Amicus. But their very first one was Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. It had Peter Cushing as the character of Shrek, the German word for terror, and much like, I guess Max Shrek back in the Nosferatu days. But it was, let's just say it was a success. It led on to a bunch of films, from like Dr. Terror's House of Horrors to Robert Bloch ones like Asylum. There's The House That Dripped Blood. There's so many. Torture Garden probably being known as the, although a lot of people, when I was younger, would point towards Dr. Terror's House of Horrors as the penultimate anthology film for Amicus. In later years, as they've been like re-reviewed, a lot of critics and Amicus fans find that Torture Garden is actually is considered now to be the best one that they did. Now, with that little background history on Amicus, I could tell you a little bit about Hammer, but I'm going to go deeper into both Amicus and Hammer in separate videos down the road. If you don't know Hammer, guys, it was a studio in the UK that was famous for a lot of gothic horror. They did like the Dracula films with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. They did like the Frankenstein films with Peter Cushing. They did like some mummy films. The first one, which starred both Lee and Cushing. You're gonna get like they had like their stock actors, much like many of them had, and their stock directors as well. Now the thing is that Amicus and Hammer shared some actors and directors, so you would see Peter Cushing in like Amicus films and in Hammer films. You would have director Freddie Francis, for instance, in Amicus films and in Hammer films. So in order to do this right tonight, I decided to break it up in categories. And so for the first category, we're not actually going to be talking about horror. We're not even going to be talking about just a genre at all. We're going to talk specifically about science fiction, but not just any science fiction, iconic science fiction. And both Hammer and Amicus had at least one series of films that fits that bill, and fits that bill very well. So we're going to look at both of them and choose a winner. Hammer took from television a few times. Amicus did at least once, and let's be honest, their Dr. Terror's House of Horrors was originally going to be a television project that became a film, from a 30-minute project to a TV pilot to a film, and a brilliant one at that. But right now we're talking about science fiction, but not just any science fiction. We're talking about two iconic science fiction characters, three in a way, and that actually might help tip the scales a bit. Hammer would become known for a character by the name of Quatermass. If you've seen any of the films, you know that they're done by Nigel O'Neill. They were originally like TV series, TV miniseries that were made into feature films. There were 3 in total that Hammer made, and they were extremely popular and very creepy. They kind of blended the sci-fi and the horror pretty well, and the films were very well regarded. I'm not sure how well regarded they were back in the day. I know that when my dad saw them back in the day, especially the original, the first one, he was extremely creeped out by the film, and he said that it holds it to this day, a lot of the creep factor. And you know, some of that may be due to the fact that he saw it when he was younger, much like certain films that I saw when I was younger may seem silly to some people by now, but they by today's standards, but they really stand the test of time for me. So with 3 films, 3 classic UK films from Nigel O'Neill, no less, what exactly did Amicus have to go up against that? It seems pretty cut and dry until you realize that Amicus had 2 films in a series. 2 films by one of the longest running science fiction TV character that I can think of that made it to the big screen. Not only that, but they managed to get Peter Cushing in the lead role for both of these films. Now they did change the character a bit, but they were 2 really cool films. That would be Doctor Who so we got Doctor Who and the Daleks, and of course Invasion Earth 2150 AD. I can never remember the number on that. Both done by Peter Cushing and both in magnificent color. So why is that such a big deal? Well, we know that Doctor Who on the big screen is a big deal. Doctor Who is back now and has gone into its 13th, 14th incarnation. Let's see. Let's go through them. There's William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, Tom Baker, Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, and normally that would have been David Tennant twice, because he kind of like regenerates from just a hand, and now Jodie Whittaker. And for the films, which wouldn't be in the same continuity anyway, because they don't even mention like him being like a Time Lord, but it was very early on. The way that the Doctor Who lore is understood now and really fleshed out wasn't back then. The made him more of a Doctor Who at this point was kind of like a scientist, he invented a time machine. He went to Skyro, and we got to see Daleks on the screen, the iconic character of the Dalek. Now, you have to understand that when these movies came out, William Hartnell was the Doctor, and he was the only Doctor. But when they went to the big screen, they kind of recast it with Peter Cushing. Hartnell was a fantastic actor, but again, Peter Cushing had that presence, like that on-screen presence that he needed for this film, making big budget one. But one of the biggest things about this is that it was in color. Doctor Who was a black and white series up until the third Doctor came around, John Pertwee. All through William Hartnell's run and all through Patrick Troughton's run, Doctor Who had been a black and white show. So for kids and fans to go into the theater and see Doctor Who in color, it was pretty amazing. But what was even more amazing was these guys here, the Daleks, rivaled and often especially in the early years, topped Doctor Who in popularity. These little pepper pot guys here were pretty menacing, especially back in the day. And when people originally saw these guys on the screen in full color, it was an incredible experience. I'm sure a lot of my, especially my older UK friends and there will be able to tell you exactly what a big deal it was to go from like just a black and white TV show to going to a theater and seeing this seeing Doctor Who in glorious color with these amazingly colorful Planet Scaros, and to see the Daleks. It was a wow thing. It was a wow factor, and through legacy and importance alone, Amicus wins this round, the very first round of the Amicus versus Hammer video. Why? It's one, it is a bigger character. These films are they're legacy films. They're films that mean something, and will mean something for Doctor Who fans, not just Doctor Who fans, but science fiction fans and fans of like, they may not be fans of Doctor Who, but were actually fans of the Daleks back in the day. It was an incredible experience. It's Quatermass is fantastic. I love the Quatermass films. I think Nigel Kneale is a fantastic writer. I think Hammer did a great job of like combining the sci-fi and the horror. But Doctor Who and the Daleks were both icons, and Amicus were smart enough to put these together on the big screen and to show us them in color for the very first time. And that cannot go unnoticed. They win it. That and the fact that most people do know who Doctor Who is and who the Daleks are. They'll know one or the other, and usually they'll know both. It does help that there have been like the modern Doctor Who has been extremely popular. And how many videos have you seen where people actually mispronounce Quatermass's name as a Quartermass? Point one, Amicus. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that category may be slightly unfair. Hammer against like putting a Quatermass, which is not as a known character, up against somebody like Doctor Who, especially when both of them are known a lot for their most primarily for their horror films. So don't think that I forgot that or that I'm leaving that out in any way. We're just going to get to that now. Hammer made a insane amount of fantastic, iconic horror films. Seriously, they milked each of those franchises for as much as they could. How much so? Well, this is only the second of the Dracula in the Dracula series. Christopher Lee was and to me is Count Dracula. He's the man. He's the guy. But by number 2, he wasn't actually happy with the scripts. He doesn't speak in this film. He's a great physical presence. This actually is a fantastic film, but he didn't like his lines. Now, that being said, I'm pretty sure some of these lines actually came back later on. And considering what he had to work with in Satanic Rites of Dracula, maybe those lines with Prince of Darkness weren't so bad after all. Now, Amicus themselves had done some fantastically wonderful horror films, some gothic horror films. I'm not going to include the anthology ones, not quite yet. We're going to get a category on that all to itself. So let's look at the films that Amicus put out, like their solo like kind of films. Stuff like The Skull, and Now the Screaming Starts, The Beast Must Die. There were a few of them, but there was nothing in that could really compare with their just regular solo horror films to the Hammer library of horror. And the Hammer library of horror it's lived on. It's stood the test of time very well. A lot of people can tell you, even if they haven't seen every one of the Dracula films from Hammer, they'll know the Hammer Dracula films. Even if they haven't seen one of them, they usually know Christopher Lee. They usually know Peter Cushing. They'll know them either as Peter Cushing. They know Peter Cushing. Well, some people know from Star Wars, but you usually know him as like either Van Helsing, or you know him as Dr. Frankenstein. Peter Cushing was a fantastic actor, and Hammer just did it well. They took what Universal had done, and in my opinion, they really added on to it. They had franchises that had legs, that had bite, and in the case of the vampire films, they had teeth. But more importantly than anything else, just like I spoke to you guys before about how hugely important it was that Doctor Who had come on the screen in color with huge, colorful Daleks. Hammer had blood, bright red blood, something that had not been seen in the early black and white Gothics. And they knew how to use it, and they knew how to use it well. They cast their films extremely well, having a lot of character actors like Michael Ripper, Michael Goff, Barbara Shelley, Ingrid Pitt, of course Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Ralph Bates, and so many more fantastic actors just littered through their films. To this day, you can watch a lot of the Hammer films, and they stand the test of time, the same as they did back in the days that they came out. They were amazingly adept with their Gothics, and Amicus, quite frankly, doesn't have anything that can stand up to the test of time on regular solo one-on-one films. So that's a pretty easy one. That's almost too easy. That's why I broke horror up into categories. So the Hammer Legacy series franchise against the Amicus solo horror films. Hammer wins, hands down. Anthologies. Amicus became famous and infamous for their anthology films. They did quite a few of them, and they became what Amicus was known for. Much in the way that if Hammer was putting out, like, say, a more psychological film or something like that, or wanted to try something different, and it did a bit of dip in the box office, they'd do another Frankenstein or another Dracula film to kind of bring cash back in. Well, Amicus had their anthology films. These were their legacy films. These were their amazingly epic things that they're known for. And they did them better than anybody else. They did them better than anybody else before them. And in my opinion, to this very day, they did them better than anybody else after them. They casted the films extremely well, using a lot of like Hammer actors and a lot of like just fantastic actors, especially people early in their career. Canadian actor Donald Sutherland was actually in at least one of the Amicus anthologies that I can remember right now. Actually, there's a few Canadian actors that ended up in a lot of British films. One, whose name escapes me right now, was actually the first story. If you watch Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, he's Canadian. We get used a lot to play like Americans or British people because I guess it just doesn't seem as impressive to say, well, I'm from Manitoba or somewhere like that, or Newfoundland. But you couldn't beat them. I mean, they did an amazing job with their films, and they took from the greatest. They took from EC Comics that inspired so many horror and science fiction authors throughout the years. So many people like Stephen King grew up reading all those Ray Bradbury stories like from the EC Comics, reading all the amazing like gory, ghastly stories done by guys like, oh God, Johnny Craig and Al Wood. There are so many of them. If you've seen Mars Attacks, those cards, the original Mars Attacks cards, that's an EC artist that did that. If you watched, I get really excited and I almost get like tongue-tied, which is unusual for me when I talk about the Amicus anthology films. They mean a lot to me. Amicus did like their own like stuff when it came to the horror. Like they had their solo films. Like The Beast Must Die was their take on the werewolf film. That could have went up against like Oliver Reed's Curse the Werewolf. Now, would it have won? I love The Beast Must Die. I think it's a fantastic little film with a great cast and a good novel little hook taken from the 1965 version of And Then There Were None, with the Werewolf Minute. There was some Werewolf Minute and Then There Were None, but I'm pretty sure, I'd have to watch the movie again, there was kind of like a stop, basically, where a minute to guess who the killer is. And in Beast Must Die, there was a minute to guess who the werewolf was. Pretty cool. But that being said, it still couldn't beat Oliver Reed's fantastic performance and just the amazingness that was Curse the Werewolf. That's one of the big reasons behind Hammer, like that, and the legacy of like plethora of amazing franchise films that Hammer had, that they won the last category. That's also going to be a thing right now in why Hammer's weaker when it comes to this. When Hammer has their legacy characters, when Hammer has their franchise characters, they do amazing. And don't think that they don't do amazing with their solo films as well, because what we're putting up here right now, just in case I didn't explain this category to you, is Hammer's solo films, not their franchise films. We're leaving those out of the equation, up against Amicus's anthology films. Now, Hammer definitely had a ton of really, really good solo films. Movies like The Gorgon, an incredible film. The Reptile. I love the makeup on that. Still creeps me out. Some of the, we'll leave it, there's suspense ones. But just some of their amazing like things like just Plague the Zombies, for instance. And they did so many others. And they did like spin off, doing some like more suspenseful films. They did early stuff like Maniac with Kern Matthews, the later stuff with like Fanatic, known to me as Die Die My Darling, with Stephanie Powers and To Little Bankhead. Great stuff. And one of my favorites being Straight Into Morning with Rita Tushingham. And that's a movie that means a lot to me. That being said, in my opinion, and you know, obviously this is my opinion, I'm the ringmaster of this circus right here, none of that tops it for me when it comes to the Amicus anthologies. They are the most watchable films that I've ever seen, probably in my entire life. That's in my opinion. As much as I can watch a Hammer movie or I'm a huge 80s fan, so as much as I can watch a Friday the 13th movie, or a slasher movie, a Halloween film, or My Bloody Valentine, or Black Christmas, my favorite movie of all time. Anthology films just really, really hit a sweet spot for me, something that I really like, that I really enjoy. I remember the first time I saw Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. I was in Alberta at the time. I was actually in grade 7, and it came on TV on a Saturday when they used to show a lot of these like Universal movies and stuff like that. And one day they showed Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, and it blew my mind. I had been writing since I was very young. I started writing probably stories anywhere, like short stories, and I write like books, like little short stories. I've been highly like influenced by the anthology films I'd seen as a youth, and later on the easy comics that I would read, and just when I got to see Dr. Terror's House of Horrors for the first time, it was an incredible experience for me. It was like nothing that I'd ever experienced before. I'd seen some before, but at this particular time, at this particular moment, it had something special inside of me. All this stuff that I'd written, all these stories that had been like coming out of me over the years, that exercise book after exercise book, it made sense. It hit with me. It connected with me, and it made me write. It made me want to write even more. It made me more passionate about writing. It made me more passionate about acting, especially since I was familiar with a lot of the Canadian actors, and I could pick them out of the shows even back then. It was a source of pride for me to actually see some Canadians actually doing some fantastic horror like that, especially in anthology films. Something that I love, something that means so very much and is near and dear to my heart. So there we go, guys. Amicus 2, Hammer 1. Not exactly how we thought it was going to go, is it? It seemed like this was going to be like a no-brainer. But for me, these horror anthologies meant the world. Let me explain a little bit more. Needless to say, when Scream Factory put out the double feature of Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror and Uncut, I was one of the first guys there to want to grab that. Amicus anthology films meant a lot to me, and at the point before that, this was pretty much all I had was From Beyond the Grave. It's been a while since I've seen this one, but I actually find this film pretty brilliant, and I really like the story that has Donald and Angela Pleasant's father-daughter acting in it together. It's a fun little film. The anthology films from Amicus meant the world to me, and that's why, like I said before, it's 2-1 with Amicus winning. So what do we look at next? Well, films that don't fit into the genre category. And they both had some, but one is an overwhelming winner. When it comes to the diversification of a brand or a line, Hammer was definitely around for longer to get that done. And aside from like horror, although this looks like it's probably horror, it's actually not. It's one of their more it's one of their adventure films. Stuff like they did stuff also like Tear of the Tongues. They did a lot of stuff. They did the On the Buses films that came as well with a lot of like so they got their comedy in there. They got their psychological stuff in there. They have their action films in there. So much, in fact, that I think that probably at least one of the Indicator box sets that's going to be coming out in the next year or two, or probably be a comedy Hammer box set. One may not have any horror in it at all, and one may be one that's just an adventure one. We'll see how those sell. We know that the horror ones sell well, but will the adventure ones sell? And the comedy ones. I know that I want the adventure one, and the comedy ones, well, we'll have to see. But that being said, Amicus really doesn't have anything that can go up against it when it comes to the diversification of the films that they did. Not ones with such a strong and long-lasting impact. a lot of people know Hammer for horror. Actually, most people really do know Hammer for horror, but in the UK they're known for much, much more than that. And that can't be that definitely cannot be overlooked for long-lasting impact, for legacy, for overall just name brand recognition. Nobody did that better than Hammer. Amicus, as much as I love the Amicus anthology films, as much of those are a huge part of my childhood, it cannot be denied how epic and awesome Hammer branded their stuff, how well they used their actors, and how well they used, like, whether you feel liked all of them or not, or you like some of them, how well they did like their franchises, like the Frankenstein and the Dracula franchise. Maybe not so much with the Mummy, though I do like them all. They don't tend to be like ones that are known to be stronger. Now, that being said, Amicus, love you guys as well, but for overall legacy, for long-lasting effects on the film industry, for being just what's known primarily nowadays as British horror. You know, some people are going to know Pete Walker. Some people are going to know the Amicus anthologies. Some people are going to know some of the other stuff. Don't know Tyburn. But everybody that knows any of that also knows Hammer. And people that don't know any of the other ones know Hammer. They know who they are. Hammer is still kind of around today. The studio was brought back. I don't consider what's coming out from them to be classic or pure Hammer. That's just my opinion on it. But I think Hammer Studios went in the 70s, and we're never going to see the like of that again. They brought Gothics as far as they could go, and farther than anybody ever thought that they could go. For that, and that is no small feat at all. That's another point for Hammer. So now we're tied 2-2. So who takes it? Legacy against, well, not just personal taste, but that has been a factor here. The films that I enjoyed, the films that mean a lot to me, has to be, when it's my versus, that's got to come into play. My actual taste and like of these films have to come into play. But there's a problem. I do like both Hammer and Amicus. Actually, I love both companies, and for different reasons, they both had huge effects on both my life and on my dad's life as well. My father was somebody that got me into a lot of these films, a lot of these Gothics, a lot of these cool horror films. How to make a decision between Hammer and Amicus? For most people, this would be pretty easy. They'd just say Hammer based on the whole legacy of it alone, of everything that they've done, of everything that's come out, of all the years upon years of Hammer books. But for me, I've got a love for both of them. So what's going to decide? I got it. All right, so March the 31st, I'm a year older. On March the 31st, fingers crossed, I should be receiving some Severin and some Hammer for my birthday from my better half. When that comes, I'm going to look at releases that I've gotten from both Hammer and Amicus, because I want to have at least a really good representation from Amicus, and I want a good representation from Hammer, and I'm going to look into those. I'm going to look into the films. I'm going to look into how they were released, to the features, to what's there, and that's going to make my final decision on Hammer versus Amicus. So right now it's going to be a tie. It's going to be 2-2, but don't think I'm going to wimp out and just leave it like that. No. About a month from now, we are going to look back into it with a final definitive decision on Hammer versus Amicus once and for all. Now, that being said, if you guys want to give your definitive decision down in the comment section down below, I would love to hear it. I do think I know how it's going to go for a lot of people, but I didn't want it to be that easy and that cut and dry. I did the categories in a specific way to do this, to make sure that I could be fair to both companies. Both companies mean a lot to me, and one winning out over the other, really, to be completely honest with you, both companies are fantastic, and the fact that we get to see movies from both companies, see some of their amazing stuff, we're all winners that way. If you've been watching Amicus, if you've been watching Hammer, if you've seen like the Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing Draculas, if you've seen Brides of Dracula, if you saw Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, if you got to watch Burgess Meredith's fantastic role of Dr. Diablo in Torture Garden, then you have already won. But who is going to win in the battle, the gladiator battle between Hammer versus Amicus? That, my friends, is yet to come. But we will decide, and we will decide after my birthday, about a month from now, in early April. Watch for that video. Alright, so just before I go, guys, I really enjoyed doing this versus video here tonight. But it does not have to end there. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I did a Scream Factory versus Arrow video a while back. Something that really needs an update. Something that I've been really meaning to dig my teeth into. I thought about doing a Universal versus Hammer video. I actually thought about doing like Criterion versus Eureka versus Arrow Academy versus BFI type of video as well. So those are just like a few ideas that I have. Even like, do I really want to get into the Marvel versus DC thing? I could do that if that's something you guys are interested in. Let me know which versus videos you'd like to see me do, and that's something that I would have a blast doing for you guys here, especially when I can actually just go into my movie library and just like dive into this and categorize it, like make different. I love these things. I love these type of videos. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you guys do like this. If you do, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're watching these videos on a regular basis, make sure that you've hit the notification bell so you know when the next video is up. You don't want to miss that final Hammer versus Amicus video. I have a feeling it's going to be a really good one, and when I'm doing that video, we're also going to be looking into recent Hammer and Amicus releases as well, so that's going to be kind of interesting. I may bring out both my Hammer and Amicus complete collections to help in when I finalize that final Hammer vs. Amicus video. So again, any versus videos that you think would be interesting, let me know in the comment section down below, and we'll talk more about this later on. My voice is going, and it really is time for tea. Again, guys, thank you for joining me here tonight in the movie library. Have a great night, and enjoy some British horror.